back to this episode of Clout is Not Currency, where we have conversations about worth, value, and influence. I am your host, Blessing Mukosha, aka Big Money B, because I'm focused on cheddar, I'm focused on cheese, and I don't let a bum chick get a touch up on me. This podcast is going to be about two main topics. We're going to talk about Billboard's recently announced changes to digital buying rules, so that's the selling of digital copies of music. And we're also going to talk about strategies for 2022 creators. If you are creating content on Instagram and YouTube, or you've been thinking about it, but you're not sure where to start and how to get your feet into it, or if you've already been creating content and you'd like to know some more efficient best practices that you can be using to get maximum reach and engagement for YouTube and Instagram, I want to share some of the strategies and practices in my 4-step content creation method. And I'm speaking from my experience as a seasoned creator. I run multiple channels and accounts. Most notably, I have no ghostwriter, which is over 18,000 on YouTube. So that's 18,000 subscribers. And across Instagram, Twitter, we have an engagement. So we engage an audience of around 100,000 each week. And between the two of those accounts, I think we have like 6,000, 7,000 followers at least. So I'm seasoned with this. I know what I'm doing. And I thought that it would be good for us just to talk about, take a different turn to other episodes and really talk about practical tools and actions that you can use if you are interested in developing your influence online with creative content. So make sure that you stick around. If you'd like an ad-free version of this podcast, then make sure that you check out my Patreon page. That's patreon.com/Blessing Mukosha. And you'll be able to watch the video version and listen to the audio version of this podcast with no ads. And I hope that you'd also like to stick around, because I also have other content on there. I'll be posting behind the scenes content, other exclusive content that I won't post anywhere else. And I hope you enjoy that too, as well as all of the other content on my channel, which of course, being a Patreon or patron is going to help, because you are directly investing in me and in my content. And that's actually something that we talk about later in this episode. So definitely stick around and listen to the rest. Okay, so let's get into our first topic of the episode. So Billboard has announced, effective immediately, changes to digital sales rules. So essentially, to summarize, there used to be two ways of buying music. You would either buy a physical copy of the music, so that if you're a kid of the 90s, you remember that you would go get cassettes or maybe CDs, and you would like burn CDs. I used to burn mixed CDs. Like, that's how you knew I loved you, is if I made you a mixed CD. And my equivalent of that now is if I make you a playlist. Like, if I've made you a playlist, like, I'm in love with you, for real. So there used to be buying physical music, and then of course the other way that you could support your artist and quote unquote buy their music was by physically getting a ticket to go on tour with them, so to go see them at a live performance. So essentially, artists had different ways of selling music. So they could theoretically bundle a physical sale with a tour ticket, for example. So you would buy a physical copy of the song or the album, and you'd also buy a tour ticket. But those weren't as common. And as things developed, including the advent of streaming, especially and online, then digital sales started to become a thing. So now in 2022, there's essentially 4 main ways that music gets distributed. The first way is that typical traditional way. You go to shop, you buy a physical copy of your faves music, as I do with my Nicki Minaj vinyl, which you can't see right now. It's usually behind me when I record this podcast, and my no ghostwriter content. But yes, you physically buy a copy of the song, or you stream it. So you may use your streaming platforms like Spotify, Apple Music, Tidal. You stream, or you go and get a digital copy of the song. Now, digital copies are super easy to distribute because it's just basically a digital media file. You can imagine why, since we're not in the era anymore where people are maintaining like a music library in the same way as we used to back in the day, when you would have to take songs like track by track off the CD player and burn it onto your Walkman or your Sony Ericsson or whatever. Like, we're not really buying individual media files, so really it's for fans. You know, fans want to buy copies and copies and copies and copies of their faves music. Now, of course, this has led into lots of different criticisms of mass buying, saying that it inflates the industry. But then you've got our fourth way of music being distributed, which is over radio. Now, radio is notorious for pay for play or payola. Radio distribution deals are a thing. And, you know, radio play is essentially the industry, music industry or industrial system of pushing music out to the consumer, because you don't pick what plays on radio, it just plays. So that's how people are able to push, you know, artists. And you can see heavy radio play can really feed into why songs do well. That's why when an artist is able to chart really high, like secure a #1 record without radio support, it's iconic. As was when Nicki Minaj and Doja Cat went #1 with the remix of Say So. And also when Nicki did that with Trolls, especially with Trolls. She appeared on as a featured guest artist on 6ix9ine's Trolls, and that was a completely independently supported single. That was basically both of their online fan bases buying copy after copy after copy of the song. So you can see how these different ways of distributing music have varying degrees of control in the actual hands of fans. You know, if a fan is buying a copy of their fave song, or a fan is streaming on Tidal or Spotify, and make sure that you check out our episode on Tidal and its rules for streaming, because it's updated and now is allowing fans to essentially generate a higher revenue for artists that they stream, and their individualized streams will be paying the artist that they support. So that's a very direct form of control around streaming. But generally speaking, you know, a fan can stream their faves artist and they can give them the metrics of like stream numbers or monthly listeners, but the real way a fan can really show dedication and support is by buying a physical copy of a piece of music. And so that's why so many fans hit back at these changes, because essentially what's changed now is that prior to this, you could buy, you know, 1 to 4 copies of the song at once. So you could buy 1 to 4 copies of the track per purchase. Now, things have changed. So if one customer buys at least 4, that's it. That is going to count only for 1 unit purchase. So if you purchase 2 or more, then that's not going to be counted. So if you go and purchase 4, for example, you've just purchased 1. It's a lot. So I'll break that down again. 1 unit purchase will be counted, and 2 or more units purchased by a customer will not be counted. And that is effective beginning the tracking week of December 31st to January 6th, so from 2022. Now, this is a big change. Now, they've also made changes to some of the like boxes and bundle deals. So artists were able to bundle their music with a physical product, for example. That is no longer a go. So in summary, album sales aren't going to be reported if they're bundled with merchandise or a ticket to a show, even if that album and merchandise is available immediately. So like you can get that merch straight away, you can get that ticket for the tour straight away. And merchandise, it has been defined as essentially anything that is not the album itself, including but not limited to clothing, paper goods, accessories, virtual items, concert pre-sale codes, access to merchandise or meet and greet opportunities, contest entries, fan club access, and so forth. There is an important difference that albums can be promoted as an add-on, so you can get a piece of merch and you can buy an album, but what's changed is you cannot buy the merch and get an album. So this is a really interesting change. I've got two main thoughts I want to get into on this, but I just want to start with the fan reaction. So some of the comments were a mixed bag. So someone complained that this is essentially removing organic support. So this is going to make songs perform inorganically because it's going to put more heavy reliance on streaming and radio play. Now, someone commented, how can this not be organic? How is one person mass buying a song 100 times organic? Streams will still prevail anyway. This concerns just digital and physical sales. Someone else said, why are they taking away organic forms of consumptions? Radio and streaming is so manipulated with urban radio and paid playlisting. Someone else says, interesting, removing digital sales but continuing to keep the big percentage of radio. Now, that whole, mixed bag, that stands essentially saying, fans want ways of buying music directly, and buying digital sales, if that is in bulk, is how they can directly support the artist that they choose and ensure that they keep the artist relevant, selling well. And inevitably, this does take power away from the music industry and allows artists to be more independent. I think the case in point with that is Nicki Minaj and her fans, the Barbs. We're strong in our millions, and we've kept Nicki Minaj the highest selling female rapper in the world for over 10 years in both pure and digital sales. She is, I believe, the second most streamed female rapper in the world behind Doja Cat, and she's consistently maintained either one or two highest streamed female rapper in the world. So I think off the bat, so the two thoughts that I wanted to have on this is, first of all, I think this is going to push fans really more aggressively towards NFTs, so non-fungible tokens, and other forms of direct ownership over their chosen artist content besides physical sales. Make sure that you check out episode 1 of CLOUT is Not Currency podcast, where we talked about artists like Tory Lanez, artists like Russ, and check our episode out on Russ as well. Independent of the industry, these artists are showing how things like NFTs mean that they can leverage full control of their career without a record label. So make sure you check out our episode on Russ, especially, where he talks about generating income without a record label. And that was a collaboration. We had a guest there, Ray Sang, on there. So make sure that you check that out. I wanted to make the second point, another really important point in this conversation around these changes to the rules, is the fact that when Nicki Minaj pointed out in 2018 that she complained about the disingenuous rules that Billboard had at the time around digital sales, including merch and tour pass bundling in relation to Travis Scott. So if you didn't know, Nicki lost #1 on the Billboard 200 album chart with her fourth album, Queen, because Travis Scott had quote unquote outsold her, but Travis had sold digital copies with tour passes to go and see him at Astroworld. He had Kylie Jenner and their daughters promoting "Come and See Me and Stormy" at Astroworld. Of course, the tragic events of Astroworld last year, with those people that died in the crush, is absolutely awful. And again, thoughts and condolences out to everyone that died, the families of those people that died, and everyone else that was responding, that was there. Is one of the most tragic disasters in music history. But the operative point here is that when in 2018 Nicki pointed out that it was very disingenuous for Billboard to allow him to sell albums with something that hadn't even been redeemed. She was ridiculed, she was called mentally ill. A lot of people had a lot of nasty things to say about Nicki Minaj at that time. only for Billboard to now change those rules in exactly the way that she said, without retrospectively addressing the fact that she was entitled to a #1 album for her 4th release. So I'm just saying, justice for Nicki Minaj. You know, if Billboard is going to change these rules, justice for Nicki Minaj. The real question at the end of the day is, has the music industry completely lost its capacity to be organic? Are artists able to curate an organic fan base and generate sales that actually relate to, you know, real life relevance? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Make sure you share your thinking on that. Use the hashtag #CloutIsNotCurrency so we can find out what you think. I want to thank our sponsor, Surfshark VPN. So Surfshark VPN ensures that you are protected as you navigate the internet, and the good thing about it is that it protects all of your information. So that's down to your sensitive banking information, things like your passwords, your browsing history, and so on. But another benefit is that it has a location switcher. So if you need to, you can switch your location in order to be able to access content or other things that you need to access from a different geographical location. And if you travel a lot, which I know is currently quite hard with the pandemic, but if you travel a lot or you're not at home, you can still get all your creature comforts from home if you use Surfshark VPN. So they have an offer right now for 83% off your first 3 months, and also you get a 30-day money-back guarantee. Check that out. To use it, use the link in the description of this episode, or use my code Blessing Mukosha. That's BLESSING MUKOSHA for your access to the 83% off discount. So I hope you enjoy that. It's got the 30-day money-back guarantee. So thank you again to Surfshark for sponsoring this episode, and now we'll get into the content. Now into the second and final topic. I wanted to talk about the best 2022 social media strategies and practices for creators on YouTube and Instagram. Now, the reason I wanted to talk about this is that there have been a lot of changes to some of the primary social media platforms that creators use to build their influences, market their businesses, brand collaborations, and other original content. I recommend that you watch content, for example, like Jade Beeson on YouTube, to learn more about Instagram, which is one of the biggest platforms that creators currently have available to them. And also to learn more about YouTube, I recommend just a simple search of the best tips for creators on YouTube, how to get started on YouTube. And I'll also try and make an effort to post some of that content on my channel as well. So YouTube and Instagram have taken really significant strides to develop themselves and make themselves more friendly to small creators and allow more opportunities for direct growth and engagement. So for the rest of this podcast episode, I'm going to talk about the different types of strategies that you can employ to make sure that you get the best engagement possible on YouTube and Instagram in 2022. I mentioned my experience running No Ghostwriters YouTube, and for my own personal content creation as well, I'm trying to apply these strategies and stay consistent. So I follow a 4-step process for content creation, which I'll discuss the strategies within, and that's ideation, creation, publishing, and distribution. So let's get into the different strategies. So let's talk about ideation. So ideation is essentially, coming up with content ideas. If you're creating for YouTube and Instagram, YouTube, of course, is connected to Google, and Instagram is hoping to become more like that, in that it will be a search engine for people looking for every type of content and recommendation that they're after. So when you're thinking of ideas for Instagram and YouTube in 2022, you should focus on thinking about things like search engine optimization. So when you're creating your content and planning what kind of content you're going to create, consider whether this is going to be something that someone's actually searching for. So the more niche and specific that you can be with your content, the better, and the more likely that somebody's going to be looking for it and they're actually going to find it. Because making content with a real specific person in mind, be like, I'm making this video for this person in this mindset, in this situation, at this point of time, it's really more likely that that's going to hit. There are billions of people in the world and millions have access to the internet. Millions are constantly searching, and more people are using Instagram. Just the other day, I really wanted a restaurant recommendation. So I searched London restaurants. Right now, the content is a bit of a mixed bag, but if there was a creator out there that was literally like London restaurant recommendations, I would have found them. I literally would have found them immediately. If they'd used the hashtag London restaurants, I would have found it because I was actively searching for ideas of where to eat. So the best way to know that if you're creating and you're, coming up with ideas properly for a niche audience is to reverse engineer your own content consumption. So consider how you use and look for and consume content and how you use the content that you search up. So when do you find creators' content to be particularly good? When do you save that content, go back to that content over and over again? And how do the different niches that you're interested in make it really easy for creators to make content that you want and that's relevant to ideas or trending topics that you're thinking about? Okay, so stage 2 in the content creation process and strategy that I use is the actual creation. So the act of creating content can be very time consuming. And I think that it's really great that people on Instagram and YouTube are engaging a lot more with authentic content that shows people's genuine passions. I think the more genuine that your content is, the more people, want to support you. And that's why in a lot of ways, I think platforms like Patreon are growing and giving creators the direct investment that they need to create content that may take more time because it's a genuine dedication behind it. I think one of the best pieces of content I ever saw, and I was thinking to myself, like, genuinely, if I watch this type of content regularly, I would subscribe to the Patreon, is this girl that makes hand-painted jackets, and she just shot this content over like a significant period of time, like it's hours and hours painting this jacket. Like, obviously she got crazy engagement on that, really great views, but she didn't paint a jacket just to get views. Do you know how much time that takes? And I think gone are the days where people even really want to support that kind of unethical content. I think it's unethical because it's really unethical after everything we've all been through, in going through a panoramic, suffering through that together. Really reevaluating our conceptualization and understanding of time and the value of our own time. Work from home is a thing now. We're no longer forcing ourselves, to think our entire day belongs to someone else. Like, all of a sudden we've had this reclamation of our time. And shout out Auntie Maxine. And I think that, that kind of content where you literally look at it and you're like, you literally wasted your time doing this. Like, that's gone. I think people want to see, people in their own lives, like their real life, what do you really enjoy? So if the content that you want to create and, put out there is more in line with your genuine passion and your genuine interest, and that content takes more time and dedication, then I would consider it an investment. As long as you're seeing positive engagement from an audience, it doesn't matter how small it is, at some point and at all points during your creative process, offer people the opportunity to invest in you. And that's not just by, reaching out and asking for like free stuff from brands, but that's literally offering people the opportunity to invest into you. You may not be monetized on YouTube, but it doesn't cost anything to start a Patreon. If you get 10 people supporting you on Patreon for £5, that's £50 a month. That's more than zero. And you can use that for equipment, or you can use that to sponsor, let's say, if you want to take maybe a half day, if you get maybe 5 to 10 people to support you, even just £5, you can afford to take a half day a month to create content. That could be a half day that you need to go visit a fabric shop so you can work on your evenings to sew and create content. There's so many different opportunities, but please, if you're making genuinely, content that's genuinely at your heart, like you really enjoy doing this, it relaxes you, you unwind creating that content, then consider that investment and consider, allow those people who want to be more than just casual followers of your content to be as part of the content creation process as you are. and calls to action on your feeds and your captions and other parts of your content will allow you to be able to achieve this. And of course, I got a plug. Make sure that you check out the Blessing Mukosha Patreon, where, like I said, you can get ad-free versions of these episodes, and you can also get other exclusive and behind-the-scenes content. Okay, let's talk about publishing. That's the third step in my 4-step process. So the headline word for my 2022 publishing strategy tips is automations. Automations, people. If you're manually plugging in your content and keeping your content calendar here in your brain in 2022, then you're putting yourself under unnecessary pressure. So let me introduce you to a few different automation tools. I'll talk about the 2 main ones that I use. So the first one is Buffer. So Buffer is an excellent social media publishing app, and it allows you to plan your content across Instagram, Twitter, Pinterest, LinkedIn, and other platforms. If you'd like a platform that allows you to directly schedule YouTube content, then you should consider Agora Pulse. The only drawback about Agora Pulse is that it's really expensive. But on Agora Pulse, you get similar or the same features as Buffer. Buffer is infinitely cheaper. If I'm not wrong, the Buffer package I use is about $10 or so per channel. And the great thing with Buffer is that you set up your content schedule. So for myself, I know I'll take No Ghostwriter, for example. We have a USA audience and we have a UK audience. So I post at different times for them. So we have a 3 p.m. post and a 3 a.m. post. Obviously, I'm not going to be up at 3 a.m. I'm going to be getting my beauty sleep. So the way we make sure our content goes out on time at 3 a.m. is using Buffer. We can set up our hashtags, we can tag people if we need to, do our entire caption, and we can distribute that seamlessly across Twitter as well, or whilst we sleep. So Buffer is a great tool. If you'd like for me to talk more about Buffer, then make sure you let me know. I'll happily do more of those tutorials on my YouTube channel. The second tool that I recommend is Zapier. So Zapier allows you to connect and automate different apps. So I'll give you an example. So for me, I want to get CLOUT is not currency onto YouTube, but I have an editor that helps me edit the video. So the editor will put that final edit into Google Drive. So what Zapier allows you to do is to connect 2 apps. So I have an automation that as soon as that video lands into Google Drive, it automatically gets sent to both YouTube and Vimeo. The reason it gets sent to YouTube is, of course, so you can watch it on YouTube. And the reason it gets sent to Vimeo is so I can make a private ad-free version for the Patreon subscribers. All of that gets auto-populated with all of the descriptions, metadata, tags, and standard content that I put in every single podcast episode. And then all I need to do is top and tail it, add the thumbnail, change the title, change a few little small bits, and then boom, it's published. Easy, no stress. I don't have to worry about whether I've missed something or missed something else. Smooth as butter. So make sure that you consider having different types of automations to support you as you're pushing your content out to YouTube and out to Instagram. So the 4th and final step in the content creation process, my 4-step process, and the final strategy and best practice for 2022 if you're creating on YouTube and Instagram is distribution. Now, distribution is how do you get your content out to as many people as you can. So you may have your content is hosted, the core content is on YouTube or it's on Instagram, but you want to distribute it to as many people as you can. So traditional ways of distributing your content is by using a accompanying blog post. So if you've got a blog, make sure that you have a way of auto-distributing your content into a blog post. So you can set up an automation using Zapier that will automatically take new content from Instagram, new content from YouTube, and it can auto-generate a blog post, and it can pull different pieces of content from there and put it together. So if you ask it to, It can, you know, set the image for the blog to be the thumbnail. You can set the title to be the video title. You can set in some standard information that you want in every blog post. But the reason that you want that on there is for that reason that I mentioned at the beginning. The reason why YouTube is so powerful is because it's a search engine. It's powered by Google, and all of your blog posts are going to get indexed by Google. And the more clicks that you get, the more likely that that content is going to be similarly recommended on YouTube. One really cool thing that Google does is it directly recommends YouTube content in the Google search engine. So if I search, for example, no ghostwriter female rap, you will find a no ghostwriter video about female rap, and you can literally click and watch it from the Google search results. So Google is distributing your content like a beast, and it's doing it for absolutely free. So really consider getting a nice consistent automation that pushes your content to a blog or something that can tell the rest of the world about it. If you've got a blog, you've probably heard about Pinterest, but if you have Pinterest, you may not necessarily have a blog. And Pinterest is the second method of distributing your content that I think is going to be best practice in 2022. I'm putting a lot of money behind Pinterest. I think that Pinterest is the future because it gives you kind of what Instagram and Twitter give but don't give. It's basically just around ideas and sharing and learning and, you know, taking inspiration from things. And so creating pins from all your content, again, you can set up an automation, or if you've got Buffer, you can auto post pins to Buffer. But set your pins up with links to your YouTube content, links to your Instagram reels, links to, you know, your other posts on Instagram. People will be able to search for that content and pin it, and they can directly link to you. Another distribution platform to consider is TikTok. I do admit I'm no professional master of TikTok. I'm still working and navigating my way around it. But TikTok is another great way as well of just getting out there to lots of people and telling the world about you and your content on YouTube and Instagram. So I hope that's been helpful, and I hope you guys enjoyed that summary of best practices and tips that I've got for YouTube and Instagram creators in 2022. So that concludes this week's episode. Thank you for listening to Clout is Not Currency podcast. I hope that this episode has inspired you to think differently about worth, value, and influence, and it's empowered you in some way. If you enjoyed this podcast, make sure that you follow and subscribe to it on your favorite podcasting platform of choice. Leave it a 5-star review. Make sure that you check out our Patreon. That's Blessing Mukosha's Patreon. So patreon.com/Blessing Mukosha for an ad-free version of this podcast, and also for other exclusive behind-the-scenes content and early access content. Use the hashtag #CloutIsNotCurrency to talk about us online, and make sure that you follow me on everything and subscribe to me on YouTube. It's Blessing Mukosha everywhere. So thanks, peace out, and I'll see you in the next episode of Clout is Not Currency podcast.